I am currently the Executive Director of Covenant House New York, where we serve homeless youth who have been trafficked, abused, thrown out of their homes. Right now we have about 250 young people who stay with us every night, either in shelter where they can stay for up to 120 days, or in transitional housing where they can stay for up to 2 years. And so sometimes they'll move from shelter to transitional housing. And then in the last year we've also developed some permanent housing options for our young people where they can stay for on a permanent basis. So the idea is to give them a longer runway to be able to have stable housing so they can do all of the things they need to do, education, employment, steady job, those kinds of things, so they can become independent on their own. In various ways, often right now it's word of mouth. We're so very well known in New York, so young people tell other young people where to go. We've had street outreach also that goes out and looks for young people in particular places. It's really hard to find young people on the streets. They're more hidden away than the older population of homeless. We do public outreach to schools, to community-based organizations, libraries, different places where we know young people will attend and might be able to get the information. And then on the city level, the city has like an information directory. If somebody calls 311 and tells them that they're homeless and they're a youth, they'll send them to us. And the internet now, our young people more and more are finding us on the internet. So right now our funding is about 60% government funding and 40% private funding. On the government side, it would be the city, a little bit from the state of New York, and the federal government, usually through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I should say we also run a federally qualified health clinic on site where our shelter is, so that we can provide full medical care to the young people who come to us. And so that is funded through a program called HRSA on the federal side, but also through Medicaid dollars. We also get funding on the private side through community grants, private donors, corporations, a variety of different ways. We actually have several fundraisers during the year, but the biggest one is always our executive sleep out, which we hold in November. We had 225 executives who slept out at Yankee Stadium. It's the first time we've had it at Yankee Stadium. It's usually at our place at 41st and 10th in Manhattan, but we're under construction right now because we're building a new building for the first time in New York. So Brian Cashman, who is the general manager for the Yankees, who is also on our board of directors, invited us to come up to Yankee Stadium to sleep out. Now, we didn't sleep on the field. We were all sort of disappointed about that, but instead we slept on the hard concrete entranceway to Yankee Stadium, but it was pretty exciting to be there. I'm really grateful to the Yankees for doing that. And I'm a Red Sox fan, so it's a lot for me to say that. It's a great night for educating and advocating on behalf of our young people, but we also raised $1.6 million, which is really important for us to do to be able to continue the services that we need for, unfortunately, a growing population of homeless youth. The young people that we're talking about are not homeless with their families. They are on their own. Oftentimes they've been kicked out by the family, and for various reasons. It may be that there's a mental health issue in the family. Either a parent has a mental health issue or the young person themselves has a mental health issue. It could be alcohol or drugs may be a problem, either again on the family's part or on the young person's part. It could be that they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender and have come out to their family and have been kicked out. So it's a whole host of different reasons, and sometimes it's just plain flat-out poverty. That they've turned 18, the family doesn't have the money to be able to care for all of the, the family members, and when the young person turns 18, they say, you're on your own. Yesterday, someone was asking me, so are most of the young people you see runaways? And that's what people think, is that these kids have run away because they don't want to follow their parents' rules, and if they just went home and followed the parents' rules, everything would be fine. We see very few runaways. That's seldom what we're seeing. These are kids who have been thrown out to the curb like the trash of the day. And the families just aren't going to let them back in. In some circumstances we're able to help repair relationships in the family or to find other healthy family relationships. But for 2/3 of our kids, that's not possible. Sometimes it's just a night that they've been out on the street for a night. For some kids, it's been a number of years. We had one young woman who had been on the street since she was 13, came to us when she was 18. And the first night she stayed with us only one night the first night. She slept on the floor because she wasn't used to sleeping in a bed. She really didn't know how to take care of herself. Both of her parents had been drug addicts. She had been sexually abused. She was herself a drug addict when she came to us at the age of 18, having been on her own for 5 years. She told us that she didn't expect to be alive by the time she was 21. She came back a week later and stayed a few days longer, left and came back. She kept kind of testing the waters to see if we were really going to take good care of her. So she ended up staying with us first in our shelter and then in our transitional living program, and then went on to, we have a program with the College of Mount St. Vincent where our young people can participate in 4 years of college. She graduated a year ago, summa cum laude, 3.96 grade point average, went on to volunteer for a year and is now working helping other homeless young people. And that's not unusual for the young people that we see. If they stay with us, the longer that they stay with us, the more options we're able to help them to have, the more we're able to help them to fulfill their educational dreams, to fulfill their employment dreams, and to fulfill the opportunities that I think bring out the gifts in them. When it doesn't work, it's heartbreaking. We had a young woman about 2 years ago who came to us. She had drug issues and mental health issues. Suffered a great deal with depression. When we have a young person who needs to go to a hospital because they're suicidal, the hospital oftentimes will evaluate them and release them on the same day. They'll give them medication, release them on the same day. Well, there's no way the medication has done what it needs to do. And so it's a constant monitoring with them. This young woman, one night, she did come back. She called us crying, saying she needed help. We called and got a car service to get her, to bring her down to us. They brought her down to us. We were able to get an ambulance to take her to the hospital. She got to the hospital. 2 days later, she overdosed while in the hospital. It's heartbreaking because this was a talented, gifted young woman. She was a poet, just a beautiful poet, just a very creative, beautiful young woman, and to lose that life that way, we thought she was safe, and she wasn't. It's a real personal loss for us, any youth that we lose. Yesterday at Covenant House, on an annual basis in November, we do a memorial service at which we remember any of the youth we have lost during the year in November, remembering All Souls. But also November in the United States is National Runaway and Homeless Youth Month. And so the combination of those two come together at a perfect time for us to remember the young people that we've lost. I think, really what we do best at Covenant House is build relationships, build loving, caring relationships, and we model that for the young person. So it is about trust, but also modeling what's a healthy relationship. Because for most of our young people, they haven't seen healthy relationships. They've seen what is not healthy. So we often have young women who have been trafficked who will tell us, if you ask them if they've been trafficked, they say no. If you have a deeper conversation with them at the right time, they'll tell you that their boyfriend has sold them out for sex. Well, their boyfriend is their pimp, but they think that's a loving relationship because that's what they know of love. And so trying to help them to see what is a truly loving relationship, what is an appropriate relationship. Certainly domestic violence, violence in the household, violence in the neighborhoods that they're coming from is not uncommon. Gang violence we've seen as well, and sometimes we see that play out with having different gang members coming to us at the same time, and then understanding that that's problematic to have them both in the house at the same time, and trying to negotiate that with them, but also trying to help them to understand again that those aren't healthy relationships. Sometimes we'll have folks who will come in trying to recruit for gangs, and so we have to be ever vigilant looking at who's coming in, but also recognizing that they have been victims themselves. And so how do we balance those two things? I mean, we can't have them coming in recruiting, but we also know that they've been victimized. So we are fortunate we have an attorney at Covenant House who works on staff. Actually, when I was first hired at Covenant House, I was the attorney, and I worked with our young people and did immigration work. Sometimes the immigration work wasn't that they weren't legally here, it was that they didn't have their documents because they were kicked out of the house. The parent refuses to give them the documents. And so then what do? They have no identification. I worked with a young mom one time who, she came to my office and she said, I don't have any documents, so where do I start? And so we then begin to chip away at that. It's like, okay, have you ever been in school? Okay, so they have some paperwork. And just looking at the different other possible sources, calling the parent and saying, will you give them to me? Will you give them to this person? That generally doesn't work well, but just trying to find the different ways to do that. We do have young people who are not documented. Particularly what happens there is most of these young people have lived in really horrific situations in their own country, have come here trying to find a better route. Sometimes the parent has not been able to care for them, and so there are avenues for them to become legal here. I remember this young woman saying to me, she's like, I had no papers, I couldn't prove who I was, so I had no identity. And so not only have they been kicked out like trash, but then they can't even say that they have an identity. And so something as simple as a paper document that says, this is who I am, can be very uplifting for them, because it's like, okay, now I know who I am. In our mission statement, we talk about God's providence and fidelity to God's people. And we also talk about unconditional love and absolute respect, that's what we owe to each other and to the youth that we serve, and that we want to be acting in the image of Christ. Not being the Savior, but being that love in the world, that image of love in the world, going out to those people who are marginalized on the margins of society that everyone has cast out, and to love and care for them and to let them know they are lovable, that they are cared for, and that they are respected for who they are.